A grand castle stands under the sky as the setting for a truly terrifying legend. A story about a wicked princess whose silhouette is framed by flowers whose acts of wickedness were passed down through generations. Because after her fiancé was stolen, she was consumed by jealousy and used forbidden magic to summon a powerful demon, revealing her tear-filled face as the infamous and incompetent witch Princess Bergiane. But the truth is she wasn't the worst witch of her era, nor was she talentless or incompetent. Instead, she was a pitiful princess with magical talent who was simply exploited, and in her current life she is insulted daily while hiding her magical talent. Which is why this family dinner is being disturbed amidst shouts of her being a disgrace to the Roble family. As her mother berates her for lacking basic education and magical skill, questioning why she even exists, and screaming that it would have been better if she were never born. While the girl Laviange sits quietly and composedly, revealing to herself that the infamous Villainess Bergiane was her past life and only she knows the truth. Her brother Mikhail then interrupts, telling their mother to stop during a meal while still pointing out Laviange's poor grades. And he gives her a sharp look, reminding her to be aware of who her fiancé is. While he sips his wine, he resents having a sister who chooses ignorance over her duties. Then her stepsister Sienna speaks up, telling her father to stop the others, and she pretends to defend Laviange, saying she is making an effort. Laviange glances over at her, while Sienna internally laments how pitiful it is that the insults have started again, ruining her delicious meal. Laviange then reflects on her third life and her memories from the past too, feeling that with over 100 years of total life experience, it's more convenient to live peacefully as someone talentless. Because her past life as Princess Bergiane was tough and infamous for trying to destroy a country. So as a reaction, she lived her next life as a peaceful Japanese woman until she was 86. But it seems fate wouldn't allow her to continue living so peacefully. As a chart explains her reincarnations from Princess Bergiane to a Japanese old lady and now back to Princess Laviange with magical talent. So she resolves to live this third life as a talentless and powerless person to find peace once more. Which is why she endures the twisted emotions from her stepsister and mother. And her brother's coldness and her father's indifference are no big deal. She then politely thanks Sienna for her concern, while Sienna internally mocks her pitiful stepsister. But Laviange cleverly points out that Sienna's tilted face reveals an ugly expression of pity, shocking Sienna as her mother comforts her. And the situation escalates, as the mother explodes with rage, calling Laviange a useless and hopeless child with a terrible personality. Mikhail just sighs at how unpleasant the situation has become. Then their father slams his hand down, declaring that's enough and telling the two troublemakers to leave. The mother and Sienna are shocked by his command. Then the mother asks Laviange to leave, but the father claims he is talking to the mother and Sienna. The mother and Sienna are shocked by this, as he sternly says meals should be quiet and he will expel anyone who causes a commotion next time. The mother tries to argue she only raised her voice because of Laviange, but in a flash of magic they vanish, leaving Laviange looking at their empty seats. Realizing her father used powerful teleportation and soundproofing magic to remove them. Her brother Mikhail then tells her to continue eating as she pleases, and Laviange happily agrees, since this is the first time she can enjoy a full meal in peace. Because she believes delicious food is an essential part of enjoying life. And she considers her father's indifference a form of equality. After finishing her meal, she thinks about the delicious dessert and plans to secretly request it again. Later she is seen in a log house where she was banished as punishment, but she's grown to like it for its peacefulness. Its only flaw is that it's old and gets cold. Suddenly she hears footsteps approaching, and her stepsister Sienna bursts in, yelling about how cruelly she's been treated. Laviange calmly asks what's wrong and invites her to sit, but Sienna angrily accuses her of ruining her dinner with their father, while Laviange just smiles serenely, which only makes Sienna angrier as she complains about her mother's fury. The story then reveals Sienna is actually her cousin who was adopted after her parents died. And Laviange thinks to herself how Sienna and her mother are like noisy little kittens. Sienna calls her disgusting, but Laviange calmly says it's nothing. Sienna then slams the table, demanding to know what happened and telling her not to play dumb. She screams that her father kicked them out because of Laviange and threatens to tell Lord Schwa at the academy tomorrow, warning that Laviange's reputation and engagement are now in danger. Sienna then smirks viciously, saying Laviange should suffer until she herself becomes Lord Schwa's fiancée. But Laviange calmly reminds her that the king is the one who decides such matters, which infuriates Sienna as she realizes she can't control the outcome. And she furiously questions why Laviange is acting so high and mighty when she is supposedly powerless. And she calls her a disgrace to the household because of her poor grades. Laviange then thinks to herself that she silenced the noisy girl with magic just as her father did. As Sienna continues her tirade telling the uneducated and talentless Laviange to give up on the prince. And she compares her to the villainous Bergienne who interfered with her fiancé's true love. Laviange internally notes that she's heard this speech so many times she has it memorized as Sienna slams the door. And the door finally breaks from all the slamming which Laviange finds unfitting for a lady. She then reflects on the idea of interfering with the prince's true love seeing him with Sienna. But she finds the thought of being in love with him far too sweet for her tastes. Suddenly her small sacred beast casquette appears on her head asking if they should just kill him. Laviange is startled by her companion Castjon's sudden murderous suggestion. But Castjon complains that the stupid prince and his mistress are always picking on his beloved Lavi. Laviange reminds him they got killed in a past life for saying the same thing about royalty. Though she does admit he has a point. As it's revealed her fiancé Prince Schwa is a descendant of the man who defeated her in her past life as the villainous Belchanyu. But the official history might not be the real truth. And knowing this truth Castjon is seriously pissed off and can't accept it. Which Laviange finds incredibly adorable. Castjon then compliments the scrunchie she's wearing. And she smiles revealing she wove strong protective magic into it stitch by stitch. Making Castjon wag its tails happily in response. Laviange then gushes over how irresistible and fluffy her companion is. Until Castjon warns her she's acting like a pervert and threatens separate rooms. Laviange quickly apologizes and Castjon says it's fine. As the little beast flies off to bed telling her to hurry up. The next day she fully expects the second prince to make a scene after hearing from her stepsister. And she finds it strange to be engaged to someone who feels like a grandson to her on the inside wishing she could just call it off. All she wants is to live happily and peacefully with Castjon and the others. But at school the second prince Schwa Robnia approaches her calling her name. He's with his group in Sienna and he looks furious. He immediately accuses her of treating Sienna terribly calling her rotten to the core. But Laviange just smiles offering advice like a doting grandma and says his face is quite unfortunate. Which leaves the prince shocked and enraged calling her a bastard. He then lunges at her yelling at the incompetent person not to mess with royalty. But Laviange calmly questions if it's appropriate for royalty to yell and glare while with a woman who isn't his fiancée. Which stops the prince and his group in their tracks as he remembers to maintain his image. While Sienna is shocked that Laviange is talking back so rudely. Laviange then states she doesn't appreciate being falsely accused of something she doesn't remember doing. And as she turns to leave, the prince grabs her wrist. He accuses her of being talentless, mean-spirited and enjoying tormenting her sister. His anger grows as he yells at her for ignoring his words and bullying others despite her own incompetence. Laviange then asks if she may be angry now since he's using brute force on a lady. He shouts back in disbelief and she reminds him that for now she is his fiancée and his accusations are completely off the mark. She looks down at her wrist with a pained expression. As his grip really hurts, one of his companions tells him to let go. His grip is forceful and tight. The companion Baines again tells Schwa that's enough. And after a tense stare down with Laviange, he finally releases her hand. Laviange looks at her arm noticing it's starting to swell. But the prince just calls her an exaggerate. Her arm looks bruised. So she asks to go to the infirmary because it's her dominant arm and she has a joint class tomorrow. The prince panics thinking she'll be seen as a villainess and refuses to let her go. But she calmly asks why he's making a victim's face when he's the one using force which she calls cowardice. This stuns the prince and his companions into silence. And Laviange thinks to herself that the noisy brat has finally quieted down. She then asks what he wants since she has been harmed. And she declares they will settle this with compensation from his personal assets. Which shocks Sienna who can't believe her stepsister is demanding money from the prince. But Baines tells Sienna to be quiet since Laviange offered a straightforward resolution. Laviange then turns to Baines Ash the third prince and asks, "Who am I?" He's confused by the question. So she clarifies that she is Laviange Rober, one of the two legitimate heirs of the Rober ducal house and the appointed fiancée of the second prince. She then advises Baines as a knight in training to consider who his future master is and act accordingly. She then bids them all farewell hoping for a swift handling of the matter, walking away and leaving a stunned prince behind. With a confident smile on her face. She just hopes this doesn't become a bigger hassle as she plans to live as an incompetent person until the end thanks to her 3 lifetimes of experience. The prince and his group just watch her go, looking completely bewildered and angry. Laviange thinks to herself that she had hoped to earn his disfavor to please her sister, but things didn't go as planned. Sienna fumes in the background, irritated by her talentless stepsister, and she vows to have Laviange exiled from the country as Laviange feels the negative emotions directed toward her. Sienna's eyes burn with hatred as she internally declares her absolute loathing for her stepsister. Thinking about how Laviange's arrogant and irritating attitude makes her want to drive her out of the country, especially since she believes her to be completely without talent. What a terrible situation. The scene then shows Sienna crying to Lord Schwa, claiming that it's true both she and her mother were driven from a dinner party all because of her stepsister. Lord Schwa comforts the weeping Sienna, telling her not to cry as she insists the whole ordeal was just so painful for her. He then curses Laviange's name, declaring her a terrible noblewoman just as the rumors suggest for making her own sister cry. As Schwa vows to punish the talentless fool himself, Sienna thinks to herself that he is the only one she can truly rely on. Sienna internally celebrates, convinced that Lord Schwa loves her and not Laviange, believing their engagement is a loveless formality that will surely lead to her stepsister's shock when the prince gets angry with her. She had expected to see her stepsister in a miserable state, but something else happened entirely. Instead, Laviange calmly proposed to settle the matter right there and announced that compensation for breaking the engagement would be paid from His Highness's personal assets. Sienna's face contorts in utter shock, and she runs away from the scene, yelling in disbelief at what just transpired. She can't comprehend how Laviange remained so calm and unshaken, even after being insulted by her beloved fiancé and physically injured. She had expected to see her stepsister's face filled with despair, but instead, another girl named Ella asks Sienna where she is going. Sienna furiously declares that she is going to find her brother, and that she needs him to scold their stepsister for her awful attitude, demanding that Ella back her up. She aggressively presses a frightened Ella for confirmation, as Ella hesitates and follows behind her. Meanwhile, Laviange walks down a school hallway alone, clutching her arm as she finds the lingering pain to be quite annoying. She reflects on the fact that she has never been hurt this badly before. And while she has been insulted plenty of times with words like talentless and wicked, she feels this time they went too far, which finally made her angry, leaving her to wonder what she should do next. She decides the best course of action is to go to the infirmary for treatment, reasoning that using her own healing magic would be troublesome later, especially with the matter of compensation and her reputation as incompetent. She arrives at the infirmary and knocks on the door before entering, where a voice tells her to come in. Inside, a mysterious-looking man with dark hair and glasses sits at his desk. Laviange smiles to herself, thinking that he is just as mysterious as she expected. She recalls occasionally running into the school doctor at hallway corners and how he always gives her an uneasy feeling that isn't quite arrogance. The doctor notes it is her first time visiting and asks what is wrong, so she explains that she hurt her arm and he invites her to sit for an examination. Upon examining her wrist, he identifies marks from a tight grip and diagnoses a simple sprain that doesn't require magic to analyze. He then asks her what happened to cause the injury. Laviange gives a creatively vague response about a collateral accident caused by an entanglement of passionate emotions, which the doctor finds to be a strangely trivial-sounding reason. He prepares to use healing magic on her right away, but she asks him to wait. She requests that he write a medical certificate for her first, explaining it will be useful as insurance for the future. The doctor observes that she is surprisingly shrewd for someone rumored to be incompetent, understanding that evidence is necessary when dealing with the royal family to prevent a cover-up. He then asks if she's truly okay with being called incompetent, to which she replies that it doesn't bother her. She explains that if being seen as incompetent means people will treat her lightly, then she can simply keep her distance from them, prompting the doctor to note that she must be alone often. Laviange simply smiles and says that she finds being alone much more peaceful than being with people she can't feel at ease with. She notices he looks at her as if she were a pitiful creature, but she insists that she genuinely means it, and the doctor says the treatment is finished. He hands her the completed medical certificate and advises her to take it easy so the injury doesn't relapse, and she thanks him sincerely, expressing her gratitude that he treated her properly without prejudice despite her reputation. After she leaves his office, the doctor is left in thought, wondering to himself if she can make that kind of face too. Laviange walks away feeling pleased that she has secured the medical certificate as a form of insurance. Elsewhere, her brother is in his study, when he is interrupted by a frantic knocking at the door. Sienna bursts in dramatically, begging her big brother to stop their stepsister. Her brother tries to calm her down, but she insists he listen to her story. She claims their stepsister fearlessly demanded compensation from Lord Schwa in front of everyone, and that she pleaded with Laviange to withdraw the demand out of consideration for her position, but she refused to do so. Clinging to her brother, Sienna cries that the family's reputation will be ruined and begs him to scold Laviange. Internally, she schemes to make her brother, who already dislikes Laviange, hate her even more, believing it is only a matter of time before their stepsister is kicked out of the house for good. Her brother listens with a cold and unreadable expression. As Sienna internally celebrates her perceived victory, convinced her brother is now angry and that the talentless Laviange will finally learn her place. Sienna is shown in a state of distress and inner turmoil. As her brother Mikhail asks her to explain what she means about Laviange demanding compensation from the second prince and questions if she was even there. Sienna tearfully confirms she was present and claims she was terrified by her stepsister's harsh words. She insists that Laviange was deliberately acting in an exaggerated way to attract attention because she is desperate to maintain her engagement to Schwa-sama. As Mikhail listens silently, Sienna continues her frantic explanation, claiming Schwa-sama was offended and that the entire family's reputation is now at risk of being ruined. Mikhail then turns to Sienna's companion, Miss Ella, and asks if what Sienna said is true, since she was also a witness to what happened. Ella appears nervous and can only stammer in response. Feeling the pressure, Ella finally confirms that a reward was indeed requested, but before she can explain the context, she is cut off. Sienna quickly shouts for Ella to stop, fearing she will reveal the whole story, and calls out to her brother for support. She grabs Mikhail's arm and urgently demands that he go make Laviange take back her words and apologize immediately, adding that her stepsister has already gone home. Sienna firmly states that a matter like this must be resolved without delay. Mikhail lets out a sigh and reluctantly agrees that he will go ask Laviange about the situation, which seems to disappoint Sienna. He then sternly warns Sienna that she also needs to reflect on her own words and actions, cautioning her not to assume he will remain oblivious forever. Sienna is completely shocked and begins to cry, asking her brother what he means and why he is blaming her. Mikhail decides that in any case, they must talk to Laviange first, while Sienna internally seethes, vowing to crush her stepsister who she sees as an eyesore and insisting that Laviange is the one who needs to change. Meanwhile, back in her log cabin, Laviange cheerfully contemplates how to use her compensation money while considering fixing her broken door or perhaps just saving the funds for an emergency. A knock on the door interrupts her thoughts, and she wonders who it could be since visitors other than Sienna are rare. When she asks who the me at the door is, the visitor identifies himself as her brother, Mikhail Roble. She tells him to come in and is surprised to see him since he has never visited before, immediately suspecting that Sienna told him something as he looks extremely displeased. Laviange internally reflects on her brother Mikhail, the 19-year-old heir who was raised with strict discipline and is known for being highly responsible. She believes he despises her for her carefree way of life. She muses that he is like a cool character from an Otome game whose cold attitude is picturesque and reveals he is part of the reason she now lives in the log house. Feeling more like relaxing than admiring him, she wishes he would leave soon and longs to cuddle with her companion Kastjan, who hides when others are around. She concludes his visit must be about the incident at school that Sienna told him about and decides to handle it quickly so he will leave. After welcoming her brother, he ignores her greeting and instead asks why the door is unlocked, worried a burglar might have broken in, to which she cheekily replies that since it was broken, it's not her fault. She explains that the door broke after someone was opening and closing it violently the other day. Mikhail immediately assumes she is blaming Sienna, but Laviange calmly adds that it was also likely due to old age and being used countless times. She then directly asks him again why he has come to visit her. He reminds her that she was ordered to live separately as punishment for bullying her stepsister and making her cry. Mikhail looks stunned by her words. Laviange points out that the punishment was given right after Sienna first arrived in their home. He realizes with dawning horror just how many years have passed since then and questions if that punishment is seriously still in effect. She recalls his own declaration that she was to stay there until one of them was forgiven and finds it amusing that he is so surprised by his own words. Mikhail accuses her of being stubborn and asks why she didn't just state her objections at the dinner party instead of escalating the situation. Laviange smiles brightly and asks if he is implying it's her fault, then playfully asks if she has ever brought up anything about him before. She points out that she isn't bothered by the situation at all and wonders why he is being so aggressive about it. Suddenly, she comes to the conclusion that this must be his rebellious phase. Viewing it as her duty as an old lady on the inside, she decides to indulge his youthful conversation, seeing it as a cute stage of growth. She cheerfully tells her brother that it's not his fault he's acting this way and that it's just because of hormones, which leaves him completely shocked and confused. Laviange then realizes that the scientific knowledge of hormones and their effect on aggression during puberty probably doesn't even exist in this world. She dismisses his confusion with a warm smile, saying it's nothing and that she just felt happy to see her dear brother growing up so healthily. Mikhail is left sweating and utterly bewildered by her strange behavior. He perceives her lukewarm gaze as being like a grandmother watching her grandchildren grow, while Laviange momentarily worries that he has figured out her true identity as a woman over 100 years old. Getting back on topic, she tells him to stop staring at her like that and asks him to state his business, prompting him to compose himself and address her. He asks if it is true that she demanded compensation from the second prince, and she confirms it is, saying it should be obvious since she was injured. Mikhail is shocked that she would do such a thing over a minor injury and warns her that the prince is furious and her engagement could be annulled. She calmly replies that she simply requested compensation for her twisted arm. She then asks if he was particularly bothered by her actions, which takes him by surprise. He finally loses his temper, shouting at her to not mess around and to think more about her position in the family. He lectures her that her engagement to the prince is necessary and that she should not worsen her impression. He tells her to bring any future complaints to him first instead of taking them directly to the prince. Laviange calmly points out that they are hardly on speaking terms, so it's unreasonable for him to get angry over matters they never discuss. Mikhail is left speechless, muttering, "Damn it," under his breath. Laviange observes that she is now being lectured by her own brother and gently chides him for using language that is improper for a nobleman. She reflects on how the emotional distance between them grew significantly after Siena's arrival and how his inaction made her own engagement feel like a lie. Her brother coldly states that the matter has already been discussed. Laviange realizes that the information he has gathered is incomplete and must have come from a biased source. She asks him directly who told him about the compensation fee, already knowing it was Siena who framed it as a disgrace to the family's honor. He confirms that he heard it from Siena but also verified it with others who were nearby, which Laviange acknowledges makes sense. He continues his lecture, telling her she made a wrong decision and should have discussed any issues with their father or with him, the heir, as a proper noble lady should. Laviange's hand clenches into a fist. Mikhail raises his voice, yelling that it's because she lacks the proper education of a duke's daughter that she makes poor decisions and is looked down upon as talentless and incompetent. Laviange coolly states that her judgment is not wrong and that since she has decided to live as talentless and incompetent, he shouldn't be bothered if she gets hurt. She then decides there's no point in continuing the conversation. She starts to laugh and calls their talk a very insightful discussion, which makes her brother angrily ask if she is making a fool of him. She tells him to calm down, asking if he's getting heated up again in another rebellious phase and offers him a drink for his anger-induced thirst. Completely enraged, Mikhail yells, "Don't mess with me," and lunges toward her, pushing her down to the floor with a grunt of pain from her. He then stands over her, clutching his chest in shock at his own violent outburst as she looks up at him from the ground. Mikhail stands in shock and regret over his violent actions. From the floor, Laviange tells her older brother that she didn't mean to make fun of him and was just surprised by the hit, thinking the pain in her arm means it might be broken. She asks him to please help her up as he panics over her injured arm. He immediately rushes to her side and apologizes profusely, and helps her to her feet. Now in her bedroom, he apologizes for entering without permission and asks to see her arm. She winces in pain as he gently takes her arm to inspect it. He tells her she doesn't have to hold back if it's painful, and she admits that it hurts. He then begins using healing magic to mend her injury. As he works, she reflects that her cheek doesn't hurt that much from his slap. She reasons that he must have held back a little and that her arm was injured from hitting a bad spot when she fell. The magic glows as he carefully heals her arm. He asks if she can move her arm and she confirms it's fine, so he notes that only her cheek is left to heal. He then gently places his hand on her cheek, using his magic once more. The healing light envelopes her as he finishes the treatment. After helping her sit on the bed, he asks if she hurts anywhere else and apologizes again, but she says she's fine. She then tells her brother she doesn't want him to make such a pained face, but he looks away and asks what kind of face he's even making. She tells him he looks like he's about to cry, and he confesses that he only meant to check on the matter with the prince but lost control and resorted to violence. In response, she gives a genuine and warm smile. He is visibly surprised, realizing that this is what her true smile looks like. She gets flustered by his reaction and asks if that smile was different from how she usually smiles. Mikhail then asks why she doesn't acquire a proper education and instead accepts being called talentless, to which she simply replies that it's because she is. He tells her that's not true, pointing out that her manners and etiquette are perfect, even if she doesn't realize it. And I myself, he says, have never called you talentless and incompetent. They look at each other as the weight of his question hangs in the air. Laviange realizes that while her brother often told her to get an education, he himself has never actually mocked her for being incompetent. She thinks that his straightforward way of caring for her is hard to understand, and she doesn't feel anger toward him like she does with the prince. Even when he raises his hand, he shows immediate regret. And so she is shocked, but she isn't angry. She felt that despite his harshness, there was at least some consideration for her in his actions. Mikhail tells her he doesn't believe she lacks talent and that he wants to know her true feelings. He says he wants to talk with the real her. Laviange's soft expression hardens into a distant one. She pushes his hand away, saying it's difficult because her relationship with the family is already broken. Shaking her head, she tells him that restoring their relationship is something she's no longer interested in because it's far too late. He argues that she hasn't truly escaped her upbringing just by running away from it, and questions if she truly thinks she can escape her life as a noble lady. She looks at him coldly and asks if he really thinks she was raised and treated like a noble lady after seeing the shabby room she is forced to live in. She asks if he can even imagine her daily life, from how she gets to school to how she spends her nights, leaving him able to only apologize. Softening her tone, she admits that even so, she could always feel his concern for her. She finds his clumsy yet sincere self to be quite endearing, even when he can only apologize. And that, she reveals, is the reason why she is still here. She explains that as a noble lady engaged to the second prince, she simply follows along without objection despite the absurd arguments. Until today, she says, she has endured and held back everything. She then presents him with the medical report, and he realizes that Sienna exaggerated the events and that this wouldn't have happened if the prince hadn't intentionally twisted her arm. He grips the report in his hands. Overwhelmed, he apologizes to her again, truly sorry for what she has endured. He tells her it is understandable if she can no longer accept the situation and asks if she wants to annul the engagement that many other noble daughters envy. Laviange clarifies that considering her family's political standing, she simply does not actively seek to annul it. Realizing he has misjudged her, Mikhail asks what she personally wants. She bluntly states she'd like to bury her fiancé and have a direct annulment. She feels he's an obstacle and not worth her emotions, adding that her stepsister and the prince suit each other perfectly, so she doesn't understand why she must be the one to marry him. And yet, despite her terrible reputation for being talentless and unable to use magic, the engagement shows no signs of being annulled. Her brother quietly agrees that she is right. This is why she personally doesn't wish to annul it yet, as her blood and position still hold some utility even if she is seen as powerless. As long as she doesn't know how she'll be treated after an annulment, she concludes it's safer to leave things as they are for now. With a new understanding, Mikhail asks her if she is only pretending to be talentless and incompetent.